The father called his obese daughter a disgrace until the mountain man said, "She's mine now." The Wyoming Territory autumn wind howled through Clearwater Junction in October 1887. In the modest house on the edge of town, a confrontation that had been building for years finally erupted. "You're a disgrace!" Thomas Mercer's voice thundered through the small wooden structure. 20 years old, unmarried, and no man will even look at you. You've brought nothing but shame to this family. His daughter, Lydia Mercer, stood in the corner of the kitchen, her substantial frame trembling as her father's rage washed over her. Her mother had died 2 years ago, and since then, her father's drinking had intensified along with his cruelty. "I've tried to find work, Father." Tried? Thomas's face was purple with rage. "You can't even walk down the street without people laughing. The whole town mocks me because of you. There goes Thomas Mercer, whose daughter ate him into poverty." That's what they say. It wasn't true. Lydia ate modestly, always had. But truth didn't matter when prejudice provided easier explanations. "I've worked at the laundry, at the boarding house, and been fired from both because you're too slow, too lazy, too disgraceful to keep any job." Thomas grabbed a whiskey bottle from the table and took a long swallow. "You know what your mother's dying words were? Take care of Lydia." "Well, I've tried. God knows I've tried. But you're beyond help." Lydia bit her lip, tasting blood. These confrontations had become weekly occurrences since her mother's death. Her father would drink, his anger would build, and he'd spend hours cataloging her failures. But tonight felt different. Tonight there was a dangerous edge to his fury. "I've made arrangements," Thomas said, his voice suddenly cold and calculated. "There's a man, a mountain trapper, comes to town every few months for supplies, rough type, lives alone in the wilderness. No wife. No prospects of finding one in polite society." Lydia's stomach clenched with dread. "What arrangements?" "I've sold you to him." Thomas said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the sale of livestock. $300. More money than you're worth, but he was desperate for help at his mountain station, and I was desperate to be rid of you." The words hit like physical blows. You sold me?" "Signed a contract. Legal and binding. He takes you off my hands, I get enough money to pay my debts and start fresh. Finally be free of the burden your mother left me." Lydia felt tears streaming down her face. "Father, please. Don't, Father, please me. This is your own fault. If you'd been a proper daughter, thin, pretty, marriageable, none of this would be necessary. But you're not. You're fat and ugly and worthless, and at least this way you'll serve some purpose instead of eating me into the poorhouse." A knock at the door interrupted Thomas's tirade. He straightened his vest, wiped his mouth, and opened it to reveal the mountain man himself. He was enormous, at least 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed too wide for the doorframe. His buckskin clothing was worn but clean, his dark hair hung past his shoulders, and his face was heavily bearded. But it was his eyes, a startling ice blue, that made Lydia's breath catch. They held intelligence, wariness, and something that might have been sadness. "Mr. Mercer." His voice was deep, rough. "I'm here for our arrangement." "Ah, Mr. Stone. Come in, come in." Thomas's demeanor changed completely, becoming falsely jovial. "As agreed, here's my daughter Lydia. Well, you can see what she is. But she's strong, can work hard when properly motivated, knows cooking and cleaning." The mountain man, Mr. Stone, looked past Thomas to where Lydia stood, her eyes red from crying, her hands clenched at her sides. Their eyes met and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or pity. "Is this arrangement acceptable to you, Miss Mercer?" Mr. Stone asked quietly. The question surprised both Lydia and her father. Thomas started to bluster. "She doesn't need to accept. The contract is legal." "I asked the lady, not you." Mr. Stone's voice carried steel beneath the politeness. "Miss Mercer, are you willing to come work for me? Fair wages, separate quarters, honest employment. She doesn't have a choice, Thomas interjected. I'm her father, and I've made the arrangement. Actually, Mr. Stone interrupted, pulling out a folded paper from his jacket. I've reviewed the contract you sent. It specifies employment, not ownership. Miss Mercer is free to refuse if she chooses, though that would void our agreement and require you to return my $300 immediately. Thomas went pale. He'd already spent $200 of it paying gambling debts. She'll accept. Won't you, Lydia? Tell him you accept. Lydia looked between her father, red-faced, desperate, cruel, and the mountain man, calm, waiting, with eyes that held no contempt or mockery. Just patience. If I refuse, she asked quietly. Then I take back my money and leave, Mr. Stone said simply. No hard feelings. I don't believe in forcing anyone into arrangements they don't want. And me? Lydia asked. What happens to me if I stay? They both knew the answer. Her father would drink away what money remained, would blame her for losing the $300, would make her life even more unbearable than it already was. I'll accept, Lydia said, her voice stronger than she felt. I'll work for you, Mr. Stone. Her father sagged with relief. Mr. Stone nodded once, accepting her decision. Then we leave within the hour. Pack whatever belongings you want to bring. 1 bag. That's all the horse can carry along with supplies. As Lydia hurried to her tiny room to pack her meager possessions, she heard her father and Mr. Stone in the other room. She's not much to look at, Thomas was saying, his earlier desperation giving way to false camaraderie. But she's strong enough for heavy work. Just don't let her near your food stores. She'll eat you out of house and home. Thomas laughed at his own cruel joke. Mr. Stone's response was quiet, controlled, but carrying unmistakable contempt. Mr. Mercer, I need to be very clear about something. The contract I signed is for your daughter's employment, not for the privilege of listening to you disparage her. From this moment forward, Lydia is under my protection. Anyone who speaks ill of her, including you, answers to me. Understood? Thomas's laughter died. Now see here. I said, understood? Mr. Stone's voice dropped to something dangerous. Yes, understood. Lydia, listening from her room, felt something shift in her chest. This stranger had just defended her to her own father, had drawn a line that no one else ever had. She finished packing, 1 dress, her mother's Bible, a few personal items, and emerged to find Mr. Stone waiting by the door. Her father stood by the fireplace, whiskey bottle in hand, avoiding her eyes. Goodbye, Father, Lydia said quietly. Thomas said nothing, just took another drink. Let's go, Mr. Stone said gently, offering to take her bag. They walked outside to where 2 horses waited, a large bay gelding and a sturdy brown mare. Mr. Stone secured Lydia's bag, then helped her onto the mare with surprising gentleness for someone his size. Before mounting his own horse, Mr. Stone turned back to face the house where Thomas stood silhouetted in the doorway. One more thing, Mr. Mercer. Your daughter isn't a disgrace. She's never been a disgrace. The only disgrace in that house is you, a father who sold his own child because he was too weak, too cruel, and too selfish to see her value. I hope $300 was worth trading away the last person who might have cared whether you lived or died. With that, Mr. Stone mounted his horse, and they rode out of Clearwater Junction as the sun set behind them. Lydia looked back once at the house where she'd lived her entire life. Her father was already closing the door, whiskey bottle in hand, alone with his choices. Don't look back, Mr. Stone said quietly. Nothing good lies in that direction. They rode in silence for several miles before Lydia finally found her voice. Mr. Stone, why did you really pay $300 for me? He was quiet for a long moment before answering. Because I needed help at my mountain station, and because when your father sent word he was willing to sell his daughter's labor contract, I knew she must be desperate for escape. Anyone whose father would sell them to a stranger needed rescuing more than I needed an assistant. You paid $300 to rescue someone you'd never met? I've made worse investments. He glanced at her. Besides, $300 is just money. If it buys someone their freedom from cruelty, it's money well spent. My father said I'm a disgrace, that I'm worthless. Your father's a drunk and a fool. His opinion is worth less than the whiskey he pours down his throat. Mr. Stone's voice was matter of fact. Lydia, I need you to understand something. I don't know you yet, but I know your father is wrong. No human being is worthless. Worth isn't determined by appearance or by what cruel people say. It's determined by character, by actions, by who you choose to be when given the chance. How can you be so sure? Because I've spent 15 years in these mountains surviving things that killed other men, and I learned that what society values, appearance, status, conformity, means nothing when you're facing a blizzard or a grizzly bear. What matters is strength, determination, intelligence, and character. Everything else is just noise. They rode on through the gathering darkness, and for the first time in years, Lydia felt the tiniest flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, her life could be something other than endless shame. Behind them, Thomas Mercer drank alone in his empty house, $300 already mostly spent, unable to escape the truth that Mr. Stone had spoken. He was the disgrace, not his daughter. And he'd traded away the last person who might have forgiven him. Based on your request, here's the revised story where the obese girl stays in town after the mountain man helps her and works to change how people see her. After Jackson Stone confronted Thomas Mercer and declared, "She's mine now," he and Lydia prepared to leave Clearwater Junction. But as they rode toward the edge of town, Lydia pulled her horse to a stop. "Wait." Jackson turned back, his ice-blue eyes questioning. "I need to think about this," Lydia said quietly. "Running away, leaving town. It feels like admitting my father was right, like I'm too disgraceful to live here." "Your father's wrong about everything," Jackson said firmly. "Leaving isn't admitting defeat, it's choosing better circumstances." "But what about everyone else like me? What about the next girl whose father calls her a disgrace? If I run, nothing changes. The town keeps believing that people like me don't deserve respect." Lydia's voice grew stronger. "I want to stay. I want to prove them all wrong." Jackson studied her carefully. "Staying will be harder than leaving. These people have spent years being cruel to you. That doesn't change overnight." "I know, but I'm tired of running. I've been running from mockery my whole life. Different towns, different jobs, always trying to find somewhere I'd be accepted. Maybe it's time to stop running and start standing." Jackson was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we'll do this differently. I paid your father $300. That money should be yours, not his. I'll stay in town for a few weeks, help you get established. You'll need proper housing, employment, and most importantly, you'll need people to understand that you're under protection until you can protect yourself." "Why would you do that?" "Because you're choosing courage over escape. That deserves support." He paused. "Also because if I leave you here alone, your father will make your life hell. But if I stay long enough to make it clear you're not alone, that changes the equation." They rode back into town, but this time to the boarding house, not out of it. Mrs. Holloway, who ran the establishment, looked shocked when Jackson and Lydia entered. "Mrs. Holloway," Jackson said formally, "Miss Mercer needs accommodations. Your best room, for 3 months, paid in advance." He placed $30 on the counter, an enormous sum. "Mr. Stone, we don't usually accept." "You're accepting now." Jackson's voice carried quiet authority. "Lydia will be living here, and she'll be treated with the same respect you show any paying tenant. If she reports otherwise, you'll answer to me. Clear?" Mrs. Holloway nodded quickly, pocketing the money. "Of course. The room at the end of the hall. It has a window and proper furniture." Over the next week, Jackson helped Lydia establish herself in Clearwater Junction. He took her to the bank and opened an account in her name with $200 of the $300 he'd paid her father. He helped her purchase proper clothing. Most importantly, he made it publicly clear that she was under his protection. At the general store, when Mr. Reynolds made a snide comment about Lydia's size, Jackson's response was immediate and public. "Mr. Reynolds, I need you to understand something. Lydia Mercer is under my protection. Anyone who disrespects her, mocks her, or treats her with anything less than courtesy will answer to me, and I promise you won't enjoy that conversation." The store went silent. Reynolds paled. "I meant no offense." "Yes, you did. You've been meaning offense to her for years. That stops now." Jackson's pale eyes were merciless. "Apologize to her." I'm sorry, Miss Mercer." Word spread quickly through Clearwater Junction. The mountain man had declared Lydia Mercer under his protection, and he wasn't tolerating any disrespect. 2 weeks after deciding to stay, Lydia faced her first real test. Mrs. Chen, who ran the town's only restaurant, had fallen ill. The restaurant was closed, and people were grumbling about having no place to eat besides their own cooking. Lydia approached Mrs. Chen with a proposal. "Let me run the restaurant while you recover. I'll split the profits with you. 60% for you since it's your business, 40% for me for doing the work." Mrs. Chen, desperate and knowing Lydia could cook, she'd eaten meals Lydia had made at church socials, agreed. Lydia threw herself into the work. She arrived at the restaurant at dawn, prepared fresh food all day, and served customers with unfailing politeness even when they were rude. Her cooking was excellent, better than Mrs. Chen's, some whispered, and her portions were generous. The first few days, many customers were hesitant or openly mocking, but Lydia refused to react to cruelty. When someone made a joke about her size, she'd simply say, "Your meal will be ready in 5 minutes," and move on. When Mr. Patterson complained loudly that the fat girl probably ate half the ingredients, Lydia calmly brought him his perfectly prepared meal and said, "All ingredients accounted for, sir. That'll be 30 cents. Jackson watched from a corner table most days, his presence a silent reminder of consequences for crossing the line from rudeness into harassment. Slowly, perceptions began to shift. The quality of Lydia's cooking was undeniable. Her work ethic was visible to anyone who paid attention, and her grace under pressure, maintaining professionalism despite mockery, earned grudging respect from some townspeople. After 3 weeks, Mrs. Chen recovered but made Lydia an offer. "Partner with me, 50-50. You're a better cook than I am, and people are actually eating here more now. Together, we could expand." Lydia accepted. For the first time in her life, she had a real business partnership based on her skills, not her appearance. 1 month after Jackson's intervention, Thomas Mercer appeared at the restaurant. He was drunk, belligerent, and demanding money. "You're my daughter. That money the mountain man gave me was for you. I need more." The restaurant full of customers went silent, watching. Lydia set down the pot she was holding and walked out from behind the counter. "Father, you need to leave." "Don't tell me what to do. I'm your father. You owe me respect." "I owe you nothing." Lydia's voice was calm but firm. "You called me a disgrace. You sold me to a stranger for $300. You told me no man would ever want me, and you celebrated being rid of the burden. You forfeited any right to my respect, my obedience, or my money." Thomas raised his hand as if to strike her, but Jackson appeared from nowhere, his large frame blocking Thomas's path. "Touch her, and you'll lose that hand," Jackson said quietly. "Lydia's made her choice clear. Leave, now." "This is my town. She's my daughter." "This is a restaurant full of witnesses who just saw you try to assault your daughter while demanding money you have no right to," Jackson interrupted. "Sheriff Barnes is right outside. Would you like me to call him in, or would you prefer to leave quietly?" Thomas looked around at the watching faces, some sympathetic to Lydia, others just uncomfortable, but none supporting him. He stumbled out, cursing. After he left, Lydia stood in the center of her restaurant, trembling slightly. Then Mrs. Chen stepped forward. "You handled that with grace, Lydia. I'm proud to be your partner." One by one, customers began to nod or murmur agreement. Not everyone. Some people still viewed Lydia with contempt, but enough people that it mattered. 6 weeks after arriving in Clearwater Junction, Jackson prepared to return to his mountain station. "You sure you want me to go?" he asked Lydia as they sat on the boarding house porch. "I can stay longer if you need support." "I need to do this without you standing behind me," Lydia said. "You gave me time to establish myself, to show the town I'm capable. Now I need to prove I can maintain that without your protection." "You've already proven that, but I understand." Jackson handed her a small leather pouch. $50, emergency fund, and the address of a law firm in Denver if you need legal help. Your father might try something. "Why are you doing all this for me?" "Because 6 weeks ago I saw a woman being sold by her father and called a disgrace, and instead of accepting that judgment, you chose to stay and fight to change it. That's courage worth supporting." He stood to leave, then paused. "Lydia, you were never worthless. Your father's wrong about everything. But more importantly, you don't need me or anyone else to tell you that anymore. You know it now." After Jackson left, Lydia faced her greatest test, proving she could thrive without his protection. The mockery didn't disappear overnight. Some townspeople continued making cruel comments. But Lydia had learned something crucial. She didn't need everyone's approval. She just needed enough people to see her worth that the cruel ones became the minority. 1 year after Jackson Stone had paid $300 and declared, "She's mine now," Clearwater Junction looked very different to Lydia Mercer. The restaurant she co-owned with Mrs. Chen had expanded. They'd hired 2 assistants and were serving 3 meals daily to packed crowds. Lydia's cooking had become renowned throughout the territory. But more than business success, Lydia had earned genuine respect. Not from everyone. Some people never changed their prejudices. But from enough of the community that she could walk down Main Street with her head high. She'd also become an advocate. When a young woman arrived in town fleeing abuse, Lydia offered her work and housing. When a child with a disability was being bullied at school, Lydia confronted the parents and school board about teaching tolerance. Jackson returned to Clearwater Junction twice yearly for supplies. Each visit, he'd eat at Lydia's restaurant and catch up on her progress. "You did it," he said during one visit. "You stayed and changed the town's perception of you." "I changed my own perception of myself," Lydia corrected. "The town followed eventually. Some of them anyway." Her father had died 6 months earlier from liver failure. Lydia had attended the funeral but shed no tears. Thomas Mercer had died believing his daughter was a disgrace, never understanding that the real disgrace had been his cruelty. At the graveside, Lydia had said only, "You were wrong about me, Father. Wrong about everything. I hope you understood that before you died." 2 years after that, Lydia married James Foster, a widowed shopkeeper who'd moved to Clearwater Junction and fallen in love with the confident, capable woman who ran the town's best restaurant. At their wedding, Jackson Stone served as a witness. "You saved my life," Lydia told him during the reception. "No," Jackson corrected gently. "I gave you 6 weeks of protection while you saved yourself. Everything after that, the business, the respect, the life you've built, that's your accomplishment, not mine. But you stood up to my father. You said, 'She's mine now,' and made him understand I had value." "I was wrong," Jackson said with a slight smile. "Wrong? You were never mine. You were always yours. I just helped you see that." He raised his glass. To Lydia Foster, a woman who proved that worth isn't determined by cruel people's opinions, but by character, courage, and the refusal to accept lies as truth. As Lydia danced with her new husband, surrounded by townspeople who'd once mocked her, but now respected her, she understood the profound truth. she'd never needed rescue. She'd needed support while she rescued herself, and in choosing to stay instead of run, she'd not only changed her own life, she'd changed her entire town's understanding of what worth really meant.